digital transformation and things like that. And, we all know the reason that we're talking about this as far as, there's so many acronyms under that one umbrella, whether you call it SCADA, whether you call it Industry 4.0 or, IIoT, whatever. We just know that we've got to get better at interfacing our equipment to people that are interested in it. And I think it's just common sense that, part of this whole divide thing is that we all have subject matter expertise, we all have tribal knowledge in different areas, and how can we get the tools and technology to start bridging those together? The other note here is that we know that it's hard. We know that, on the first glance, you look at all the slides and all of the things that Amazon and Azure and Google and IBM have, and it's like, man, this is great. I can connect these little cartoon icons together, and I'll have data in a data lake. When the actual fact, and we all know it, is the hard part is getting your SCADA infrastructure, getting your operational infrastructure into a new format that makes it to where not only are you solving the OT problem first, you've got now the ability to plug directly into the cloud or other applications. And, I think we're overplaying, what all the magic's going to come out of the cloud. We just need that connectivity, and we need the tools to be able to do that. Now, again, it's what do we know? What do we as SCADA engineers, as integrators, as OEMs, what do we know of what it takes to get OT data out? And then how do we take the tools and the technology to get that into a form that IT can consume? Again, I'm thinking of the poor data analyst that gets a register value of 17, and Todd says, oh, well, I want you to do something with that. Well, it takes him 6 weeks to try to track down where that piece of data came from and what it's supposed to represent, let alone what is he supposed to do with it. So, part of the journey that we've been going with Chevron and the documents that they put together and things like that is that if we look at, this is 2020, by the way, and so if we look at a publish and subscribe, a message-oriented middleware infrastructure, what do you get from that? And MQTT has been around for going on 23 years now, and it solved a lot of those problems in that it wasn't overly complex. It was efficient enough to run on our, all the way down on our slowest VSAT cellular radio networks, but it was still stateful. We got to go back and say, hey, if we're going to put in a technology, we still have operational managers. We have SCADA managers that I've got to show them a better, faster, more secure, more available, more scalable SCADA system, real-time, mission-critical SCADA system first and foremost. Because if I can't show them that, then forget about changing infrastructure because it'll never happen. Now, we got pretty good at that over the last 20 years, but there was a missing piece that we kind of pulled in here about 4 years ago, and that was to take MQTT and then put a bit of definition around it, and that's using SparkplugB specification. And that, note here that if you've seen this deck before, I've added a new bullet point. Todd, myself, Don have been talking about it in the SparkplugB working group. So not only do we define an OT-centric topic namespace that makes sense in the SCADA operational space, a process variable-centric payload that's efficient so that we can still utilize our networks efficiently. But this other notion, and it just kind of came out, it was in the original SparkplugB specification, but now we're starting to understand the value of being able to define a data model. And you're going to see that in my demo going forward of why that's so important. And then, once we've got that infrastructure together, we've got the SparkPlug spec. Now we've got cool things like auto discovery, store and forward, and all the other nice things that go along with that. So instead of boring you with the rest of this deck, I'm going to jump right to where did we start?
Hey, Arlen. Yeah. I don't know if you can, if you're the one that has to administer people into the meeting, but Jose is trying to get in. I don't know if that's you or Don.
Okay. Make sure he didn't use the Google meeting. He used
Right.
Okay.
10-4. Okay.
Other than that, he should just be able to come straight in.
Yeah, I think he can already. It's just he can't use Google.
Yeah.
Yeah, I sat there by myself like a special person.
Yeah,
for a while, so.
I have to watch that when I do calendar invites. Google keeps putting Google Meeting in there, and usually I remember to delete it out, but this time I kind of accidentally left it in there. So hopefully he can get on. So this is, Jonathan, this is kind of where we started. We all got together in Bakersfield, and we had a Multitech a conduit box, and we had this notion of LoRa, and then, I got to talk about MQTT and SparkPlug, and kind of like, where were we going to take it? Well, Jonathan kind of challenged everybody to go away and come back and see what we could do with the notion of, remember Todd's notion of forget everything you know about SCADA, and if you wanted to automate something today, how would you do it? I love the notion of the mind eraser, and okay, let's look at this in a different light. So we got our conduit, and it came interfaced to the LoRa network, which is pretty cool. So out of the box, what we got a node red flow, and in this node red flow, we can see LoRa messages coming into the conduit, but we really needed to do something with them now, right? So I'll come back to this. This isn't the original flow from Multitech. It's been modified a bit, but we'll go into that. So we needed to do that. So let's take a look at the conduit. So here's the conduit. It's got Ignition 8 Edge installed on it. And you can see I've got some Allen Bradley, Modbus. I've got an Emerson Rock flow computer driver. And notice down here is because of the great contribution by Travis Cox from IA, we've also got an Ignition to Node Red bridge that we can utilize. So we got all this installed, and so now let's go into the designer on the conduit. So here we're looking at the designer. So this is Ignition 8 running on the conduit, and we're going to go in here. So what I did was I wanted to create a MQTT architecture. So I started at my edge, and I said, well, let's call that the Multitech group. And under the Multitech group, let's put a Kansas City office. And under that, we'll put the Conduit300. And then under that, we'll start adding some of the interesting devices that we can connect to. Now, one of the things I'm going to show you is that, for that fictitious oil well in my backyard, we've got an Emerson Rock FlowBoss 107 connected to the conduit. And I can go in here and I can go into the FlowBoss 107, create a new folder, and we'll call this raw tags. And under raw tags, I can go to my OPCUA polling engine, and I can go over here. I can see that I've got a FlowBoss 107, and it's got meter configs for meter run number 1. So I'm going to take that whole folder, and I'm going to drag, and I'm going to drop it in the raw tags. All right, so look at there. I got all of the meter configuration information from that flow computer, or that pump-off controller, if we want to call it that. Now, these are all the standard tag names that came from Emerson, and there's all the values there that can be enumerated. But now, again, let's go back. remember, we're talking about digital transformation. We're trying to make information useful to other people other than the meter tech that knows exactly what GASHV is and what does it mean. So I'm going to delete this whole raw tags folder. And let's go back and rethink this. We've got tools here, and one of the great tools with Ignition is that I can define a user data type, a UDT. So I took that UDT and took all of those tags that came from the meter configuration, and I started to organize them. So let's take these tags and put them into the advanced folder, and then we can deal with this. Now we have tag names that have meaningful. We've got some structure. We're building a data model. We're building a data model that we can reuse. And again, you know, I love the fact that we as engineers in SCADA deal with things like the orifice material enumeration. Okay, so that can be a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I know what happens is Jonathan Polly is going to call Todd at 3:30 on a Friday afternoon and say, hey, Todd, for that brand of pump-off controller, what was the enumeration 3? And Todd goes, I don't know, I need to call Jose. And Jose has to call somebody else. And then maybe 3 or 4 hours later, we come back and we go, oh, I know what 3 means, right? But what we can do here is that we can create information for our users. So we can have a orifice material tag. We created this tag in the UDT, and you can see here that it's a simple enumeration where I can take 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and turn that into a string, stainless steel, Monel, carbon, so on and so forth. So I've added more context to that, to this model by doing that. And there's a whole bunch of enumerations in here you'll see that will come out. So if we go in now and we add the meter config, meter run number 1, all we have to do is point it right here at where it lives in our OPCUA engine, and then magically this is the result. Now I've got a proper model where I can go into advanced and see here that, oh, my pipe material is stainless steel, my orifice material is Monel, my atmospheric calculations are entered, right? So now we've blown this out into something we can deal with. So we have a data model, we instantiate it, now we've got an asset we can deal with. Now, let's go to LoRa. Okay, well, how do I get started there? So I worked with Al and all the guys at Multitech. They were great. And we came up with the concept of a UDT for a LoRa network. I want to know what the EUI is. I want my coding rate. I need to know my LoRa sequence number. And I'd like to know my RSSI and my signal-to-noise ratio, as well as the RX channels that are being used. Now, once I've got the LoRa network set up, what does a radio bridge ultrasonic level sensor look like? Well, I want to know the battery voltage. I want to know the packet count. And I created a new tag here called total message count, because you'll note that in LoRa, it goes 1 to 15 on the packets. Well, you don't know how many you got for the day, and maybe you need to know how many messages you've sent in a certain period of time so you don't exceed your LoRa messaging rate. So we did the UDT, and then through the magic of Node-RED, we created 2 functions. One function in Node-RED that knows how to populate a LoRa network UDT, and then we did another one for a radio bridge ultrasonic level sensor. So it knows how to populate that UDT. So now if we go back to our designer and pop into the LoRa network, I've got all this information. I can tell you its application EUI, the gateway ID, the signal noise ratio, how many messages I've sent. Then I go down and I want to create an instance of that radio bridge level sensor. I'm going to call it a chemical tank. And now I've got all of this information. So if I look at this is the tag that I created on the last message type. It tells me it was a periodic report, and it came in on packet number 6. And my tank level is 837 millimeters. Well, I created a scale tag that says it's actually 0.84 meters. So now if I reach over here, I'm going to move the level sensor. And my office isn't that big, so I'm not going to be able to get to 10 meters. Oh, there we go. Report on change increase, packet number 7. We're now at 1.15 meter. So now let's say somebody was out there and I'm monitoring the tank, and all of a sudden, I took a piece of tape off, let go of the lid, heard it click. Oh, tamper message. So tamper is now yes. I got a tamper message. And again, I'm keeping track of the total number of messages that I've got over the course of any given period. Or we'll do this right now. I can say, well, I'm starting my 24-hour period, so I'm going to go in here and write to this and make it 0. So now we've reset our total message count so we can keep track of that. Of course, we have other message types, like I can touch the magnet to the sensor. That should create a supervisory message, which it did, which updated my battery voltage and all my other parameters as well. So really, this is kind of cool. We've got a flow computer, we've got a level sensor, we've got all of the LoRa networking information. So now I would like to do something with this. So let's go back to our flow diagram here. Well, now I'd like to connect this up to something so that I can publish that data using MQTT into an infrastructure, and then maybe use something like MQTT Engine to be able to connect into that to go bring some of that information into an ignition gateway. So let's go to the ignition gateway. All right, so this is the designer in an ignition gateway. And you'll notice here I've got an MQTT engine tag provider, but there's no information in it. I don't have any data types. I don't have any edge nodes. I don't know anything. So I'm going to go out here. So Jonathan just installed that conduit in his backyard oil well, and he's just hooked it up and says, "Okay, Arlen, I'm getting ready to turn this thing on." Well, then what we'll do is we're going to go into our ignition gateway, and we'll look at the modules that we've got here. And one of the modules we've got is MQTT Engine. And MQTT Engine is pointing to several MQTT servers that I've got available. And the conduit is making a connection to one of those MQTT servers. So I'm going to enable MQTT Engine, save the changes. And now what's happened is that in my infrastructure, we've now established a connection from the conduit with this MQTT transmission into a broker, and then Engine connect to that same broker. And when that happened, the conduit using SparkplugB in its in-birth published the data models. So what did that result in? That resulted in, now if I go, remember this was empty, well, oh look, now I have data models. And then within the edge node folder, I've got the assets that use that model. So my FlowBoss 107 meter configuration, meter run number 1, and here I've got all of the data and the properties that I need for that model to come populate for all my tags in ignition. Now, again, taking advantage of that, let's just see what the power of a data model is, because I can build a template off of a data model. And so now I can take this model, drop it onto my dashboard, go to FlowBoss 107 meter setup, go into run mode, and in less than 5 minutes, I went from not knowing anything about a very complex piece of equipment in the field to having a dashboard that I can go in here right now, click on Carbon. Now, when I change that, that's going to publish a message to the conduit. The conduit's going to then reformat that into a ROC message that goes into the flow computer. Then it's going to read it back and publish the result. So I click on that. That went to the broker. Oh, we're already back. So the Multitech with the ROC driver went down, changed that orifice material, brought it back. So that quickly I can build dashboards from scratch. Now,
so just a quick question, Arlen. So on the actual UDT definition, are you defining the base format for the dashboard in the UDT designer? Is this how this is created?
No.
Or is it all dynamic?
This is created using a template tool within Ignition. So it's
an Ignition template. Okay.
Yep. Now, big disclaimer here, guys. I'm a mechanic. I'm not an artist. So if you guys want to see really pretty dashboards, then you need to get on another call with Travis Cox. So just a warning there. So let's go down here. We got our LoRa network. So we're going to take a look at that. So let's take a look at that. Here's our Multitech LoRa network. Pretty cool. And let's go grab the tank level device. We have our chemical tank, so let's drag and drop it over here. And again, in a few clicks, and I want to make sure that everybody realizes, and this is Todd's pet, he loves this, is that I haven't written one line of JavaScript or Python code yet, right? So let's go into run. And notice here, now I'm trending. So now if I go over here and move my level transmitter, and let's close the lid so we can get rid of our tamper detect. Okay, what we're doing is we're putting those event packets, we're putting those into history on Ignition. So now I've got the ability to go back and say, oh, well, look, at 527, I got a tamper message, packet number 10. I got a report on change decrease because my tank level went from 1.15 meters down to 0.86 meters. And you'll notice up here that on every message, we're keeping track of the RSSI. I could have done the signal noise and trend. Anything else I want, I'm able to build these dashboards out. Now, I've got valuable information, I think, from LoRa sensors that makes sense. Now I can use these. Now I can really take advantage of them. So I've got all this cool stuff now. I've got my flow computer. I've got my pump off controller. I've got all this information. I've got real-time meter information coming off of the flow computer as well, with all of these changing. But now let's go back to our flow diagram. What I'd like to do is I'd like to get that information to the cloud, right? What do we want to do? So you look at this. I don't care which cloud service provider you look at. They all have fantastic tools. But where do you start? Where do you start hooking all this stuff up together and realize every time you connect to one of these little icons, it's a little bit of cash register behind it each time you do that. And you've got to take care of it. And you've got to have IT people that understand where that data is going. And the biggest issue that I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years we've been working with customers is they make the mistake of just throwing everything from operation level up into a data lake. Now, I thought that was pretty cool at first, but what I figured out is that's just kicking the can down the road. Because now you got a whole bunch of data in a data lake, and you got to hire an IT staff to go suck the data out of it to give it context so you can start doing something interesting with it. Wouldn't it be cool if it was as easy to get information into a cloud service as it was for me to get that LoRa tank information into Ignition? So we've been working with Amazon here lately. And so I'm going to show you this, is that now we've got a new service in Amazon called AWS IoT Sitewise. And to me, this is huge in that it's been the missing piece of the fact that we can't just keep throwing process variables, even if they had engineering units and a tag name. So pressure 1, 400 psi. You keep throwing those into a data lake, but you don't keep any context. How do you keep context of those? So if we go look at Sitewise, well, Sitewise is a service that Amazon has that lets you build a machine model. And then after you've built the models, you can instantiate them, call them assets, and those assets have process variables. So now we've got a native way to take all of this information. Remember, let's go all the way back to the conduit. We started the data model as a single source of truth on the conduit, and it made its way up to Ignition. But what if we could use that to get it all the way into the cloud? So if I look here, first thing I can do is I can build models in Sitewise. So you can manually go in here, and it would take me literally, I'm not kidding, it would take me probably 2-3 days to type in all of the information that I showed you guys on the meter config UDT, because I've got to define all the model, and then I've got tools here. I go into assets, and I go in, I can create the asset. So now I've got to give it all the process variables, and I've got to rename them. They're probably not going to line up with the same names that I had out in the field. So what we're going to do is, instead of doing that all manually, we're going to go in, and we're going to take MQTT transmission, and we're going to configure that to connect to the MQTT server that Amazon has called AWS IoT Core. Now, once it hits that, we have built a AMI that runs on Amazon EC2 that knows SparkplugB, and it knows how to build the models into Sitewise. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into Sitewise engine, and again, note we're not writing code. I'm going to go into MQTT transmission, and notice it's not enabled yet, and I'm going to go to the transmitter, and note here that I am pointing at my edge nodes folder, and I'm going to publish that out. Anything that's in that edge node coming from the conduit is going to be published via MQTT transmission. And all I had to do that is point it at the AWS. This is my endpoint in AWS, and these are the TLS certs that I got when I enabled my MQTT server on AWS. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go back over here to General, and I'm going to click on Enable. And again, let's just go over here. We don't have any models. We don't have any assets. So click here. Let's go into Engine, Enable Transmission. Okay, so what's happened is we've made an MQTT connection into AWS IoT Core. We publish a Sparkplug in birth. The in birth contains the UDTs, our models that we need to build a model in Sitewise. So if we go back to Sitewise, go to Models. Oh, look, we've got a meter config model, a meter data model. I've got a radio bridge ultrasonic level sensor model that has all the same names as my UDTs. It has the engineering units where applicable for that ultrasonic tank level. And now if I go back, it takes a bit to build the actual assets as we go through this, but we'll go through assets. Oh, okay. Now we've got all of that meter information that came from that Rockflow computer out in the field is now in a model going into a time series database in Sitewise that I can go look at. So here, imagine that. Imagine being able to populate all of the meter data in real time by simply clicking a button. Now we'll wait for it to build out all the assets. All right, I got all my assets. I got my tank level. Here's my chemical tank, my LoRa network metrics, and now I can go in here. They do provide a dashboarding tool, so I can go to a portal and just prove to myself that all this really is going into a time series database. So here, and let's pull up our meter run. You can see here's my average pressure. It hasn't changed anything, but if I look here at my flow time today, then that's going into the time series database as well as the flow today. So now I've got a dashboarding tool that I can leverage against AWS. But you can see here it doesn't quite have the richness of tools that I already have in Ignition. So let's go back to, what does our workflow look like? Well, now I've got all this information. It started here, a single source of truth at the Multitech. Now it's in Ignition from a real-time operation standpoint. I've got all this information. But wouldn't it be nice if I could take the expertise and the technology that everybody knows here and plug into Sitewise? Well, that is a new product that SiriusLink just did called Sitewise Engine. And Sitewise Engine knows how to interface into the APIs on AWS Sitewise, and then guess what? It creates UDTs in Ignition so that now we can use the same tools that we're already familiar with to build information off of that. Now, it may not want to have the same information coming in, but the value here is that we know that people like Accenture, Deloitte, Capgemini, Wipro, they're all working on apps, and everybody are starting to migrate towards using Sitewise as the standard model so that we can bring new information back down. So imagine that, let's leave this Ignition gateway. Imagine now let's travel across the country. We're going to go to Houston instead of Bakersfield, and I've got a new engine here. I'm going to delete these. Okay, now this is a totally another location. Doesn't have anything to do with SCADA. They're going to connect into the data models in Sitewise. And I want to have a look at them within Ignition. So I've got this new tag provider here called Sitewise Engine. And again, notice it doesn't have any data types, doesn't have any edge nodes. But if I go back and look at the configuration on my engine, and go down here, well, I've got this new module in Ignition called Sitewise Engine. It's really complex to set up. You basically point it at your Sitewise. So you have to give it the region, your access key, and your secret password. Now, what I'm going to do is when I hit enable, that's going to cause Sitewise Engine to make the connection into AWS Core. And let's watch how quickly we can build all of our models and all of our data back from Sitewise. So I'm going to enable it right now. Okay, I'm going to run over here real quick. Let's go to Edge Nodes, MT Group, Kansas City Office, the LoRa devices, the chemical tank, and there it is. And again, I can leverage the same technology in coming over here, and now I've got a transmitter, and I can put up dashboards and all that. Now, realize the history isn't showing up here because this is another instance, so that wouldn't be a good example of that. That would be a different history provider, but it shows you what we did in that whole process is we started with a notion of, wouldn't it be nice to get this information in a format we could consume? We started putting tools on it that enable that, using message-oriented middleware to build that out, to basically come up full circle. And now, I'll leave it at next steps. So that's the end of my presentation / demo, and we can open it up for questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Jose here. I was wondering how you get the tags aggregated into the Amazon namespace. So basically what you're saying is that you create the model just once and it's going to be in Ignition as a UDT. So
Yes.
I remember we talked about this. So Ignition is the tool.
Yep.
Yeah, so the only one tool. Even descriptions and everything gets translated to Azure, right? If you had made a data into the Ignition model, you know what I'm talking about. Like you add additional information in there.
That's what we're talking with Microsoft about. Where we are with Microsoft where we were 6 months ago with Amazon. They've got to get it. But you're right, Jose, is that there is a translation layer here in that ability where we know how to create a model. In that model, now we've been able to create those tags within Sitewise. That gives us the model.
But once you pull the model from Ignition, you can always go to Sitewise and change it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Or add to it or embellish it. Yes.
And Jose, this also allows you to have the apps. Somebody's building an analytics package and want to gain, use insights. Maybe you have a model run up in the cloud, but then you provide, hey, I want to run this more efficiently. You can actually have the Sitewise engine subscribe to those inference, model set points, not necessarily tied directly down to a operational standpoint, but maybe just a reading point of a model of the inference that you can have someone locally instantiate, for you and your Purdue model. Now, I was saying, like a Microsoft, we're looking to build the same thing in a Microsoft with time series insights. That's next in line after we finish the launch of the AWS stuff. That's going to be coming, following up next in line for a very similar solution. Now, this would bypass Azure IoT Hub because that has a namespace that is fixed, whereas AWS IoT Core does not, and so you'd have to use a separate broker like Chariot on the Azure as a infrastructure than IoT Hub.
So what is going to happen with the rest of the metadata that comes with an Ignition tag? Is that also being aggregated? You know what I'm talking about? The high limited, low limit, alarm, and all the stuff.
Right now, we are looking at pulling all that over, as well as being able to pull over attributes, Jose.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. More like a model instead of plain text in the cloud. More like a real model with attributes and properties and even methods.
Yep, agreed.
Yep. Okay.
So Arlen, here's another question. If I've got a cold instance of Ignition and I'm connecting up to Sitewise, does all of that template data come with it, or do we need to load the template data, the Ignition template data, into the cold instance and then synchronize the UDTs from Sitewise?
Yeah, you would have to do that. We're not pulling across because this, if you can imagine, this was designed by my idea of a ultrasonic level transmitter.
I just want to be clear, Arlen, that people that aren't familiar with Ignition, when they see this, they're like, well, I'll just spin up an instance of Ignition, click this, and then everything starts working. There is a bit of legwork to make that piece work, right?
Yeah, there is. So if I got rid of this, if I got rid of that, okay, you wouldn't have that. But in all cases, you would have all of the UDTs, you've got all the tags, and all of the metadata that goes with each of those tags.
Just not the Ignition template that was rapidly deployable. Okay.
Yeah, most of the work you're going to have is creating the UDT models at the edge. That's a lot of your data structure. That's going to be a lot of your work to figure out how to represent everything. And once you have that, then it's just going to be more of just plug and play and enabling.
And then what we intend to do on the Multitech side, and Jonathan, for you, is all of the UDTs that we built, and Al King and I are working with as many LoRa devices as we can. Then we will make all of these functions and all of the UDTs available to download from our website.
I have a question.
Sorry, Jose.
No, I just have a quick question about the Node-RED module for Ignition. So what it does is just binds Node-RED attributes to Ignition tags? Is that what it does?
Yeah. So
okay, that's the only thing it does.
If I look there, Jose, it's just a bridge, and if you look in here,
correct.
It's my output is building the tags.
There you are. Okay. I don't know if you explained this before because I came late to this meeting. So.
No, I was wondering the same thing, Jose.
Oh, okay. Good.
So, Arlen, this is Karthik. I have a couple of questions for you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. So, first one is the graphic. Did you do like a perspective graphic and template it for this one, or did you pull it in from like an FTT frame that the flow computer typically gives?
Hang on here. All right. So if I go into here again, Karthi, I don't know if you heard me at the beginning. Is that I don't do dashboards for a living. So
yeah.
What I did was in here. Oops. Let's go to this guy. So here is how I designed it. I didn't do it in perspective, Karthik. Again, I'm no expert in perspective yet. I haven't had enough time to get expertise with it. So this is my template. And then as many times as for every, device that shows up using that UDT, then this template's going to get instantiated if you want to use it. So this is the template that was created when I took this UDT that was built on that template and I drag it onto the screen. Then that goes and finds that radio bridge level, and then that's what brought up the template.
Got you. But is there a way to import an FTT frame graphic directly? Because all this work has been done by the manufacturer for you, right? Because he has done some amount of data model, some amount of organizing the data, doing some of the graphic layout for you. So if you can read an FTT frame and import that graphic in, that would be wonderful because the legwork will also be eliminated.
Well, and I think that's a question for Travis Karthik, but I know that he builds UDTs all the time with just really simple scripting.
I have a question. Is any plans in the roadmap to bring the graphic templates also into Amazon? Like turning this into something that we can use in Amazon or Azure, for example, into Power BI dashboards or stuff? Is there any plan in the future to do that too?
That could definitely be on the roadmap, Jose. Yeah,
like you use Ignition even for dashboarding too. Like you do it one time and then you propagate it everywhere.
Well, but remember though, Jose, that's what I was showing you here is that we are doing that because we plugged Ignition into Sitewise to build respective dashboards if you want to.
Oh, but you have that Ignition is in the cloud. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, that's.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can that Ignition run on the gateway itself locally rather than running it on the cloud? Especially so that we don't have to run as IS cost model or run a VM on there, especially for Azure. I'm not talking about AWS at this point.
Yes, for whoever's talking, this is the other epiphany that I had, is that if I do this, now I could have some information coming from analytics. I could have it back on my on-prem gateway.
Right.
So definitely, I'm already seeing that, definitely. So I get your point totally, is that I could have another Sitewise engine and it's connected on-prem. It may not be, it doesn't need to look at the same data, but if other people were doing other data models into there, then they could look at that information locally. So yes, it gives you a view directly using all of the Ignition dashboarding tools, alarms and all that, and perspective, so high performance mobile, so I could be out in the field at this conduit actually looking at dashboards that were coming from information that had come from the conduit that had run analytics that want to go back out to a technician in the field with a cell phone.
So you mean that you define the model as close as a process as you can, and then you just pull and propagate the UDT everywhere?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's not a good idea to have multiple models, one here, one down there, one closer. So if we can have one and just move it and aggregate as we need.
Yeah, and I think as long as it goes to the edge device itself, I think there's more. It's better to do that on the edge rather than doing it on the cloud.
I mean,
because
come on, Jose, it's got to keep people employed, right? That's why we have multiple models everywhere.
How did I hear that?
Yeah,
I know you didn't hear that, Jose. I know you didn't.
Yeah.
As people update or change remote edge, the new birth certificate will update the model. So if you update the model or do something, at the edge, you don't have to touch anything. The one thing, there is a slide that I'll usually show is there's no programming required in any of this. It's pure configuration, zero programming.
Yeah. Now my concern is if you have multiple models, what happens if you change one? What is going to happen to the one downstreams and the one upstreams?
Well, that's
so
it.
We need to have it synchronized somehow.
There is some discipline around that in the naming of that, and one of the things that is on the roadmap already is having UIDs for UDTs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that will work with some kind of checksum or something. Yeah.
The overall really cool thing here. Number one is this conduit has been rock solid, guys. I've been running it for 6 weeks. It's been here in my office. It just runs. The other thing is the realization that we've got to have a data model in the cloud. If we keep throwing tags in data lakes, we're never going to get there.
I completely agree with you. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not near as technical, so I have some capability questions. So are we saying that the cloud or on-prem for instance of Ignition, we can control from the cloud and it pushes back down to the field? Is that correct?
Not yet.
Well,
you could, Todd. So here is your pipe back to the field.
Mm-hmm.
So you could, but be very careful there. But yes, what this means is you could have data going into the cloud, do some analytics on it, coming up with some results that you would like to get back to operators on-prem, and that is this Sitewise engine.
Okay, and I'm just thinking, future, because we got to have that long-term vision. So that's one. Now the other thing is what would be the best way to implement this in our Purdue model now? Is that some sort of another distributor in level 3.5 to level 4 to the cloud, or I'm thinking IT freaking out now. Would we just put a data diode for now to connect level 3 and then go straight to the cloud that way?
As long, I've been talking with Owl Technologies, and the one-way diode is great, except when you lose comms and the diode doesn't have any way to tell you that your device just dropped off the MQTT network.
Okay. We're working on that. We're working on that eventually.
But the question of getting data back down that's the question of how you fix the Purdue model. Upstream to the cloud, going to the cloud works fine. It's just how you want to manage the data going back and have it just be an inference and not have any direct connection. It could be a different application, totally on a different screen. It's not necessarily the control system. Maybe you have a separate ignition system that doesn't have any operational contact to the network, but you can have people look at the screens to see if they want to do the inference modeling. Somehow you'd have to have that other visualization, and necessarily tied to level 3 or 3.5, from 5.
Yeah. I'm thinking baby steps, Kurt, because we're gonna have to bring them along very slowly, and baby step is having a data diode in there now. Then maybe a one-way firewall, whatever. I'm trying to think ahead.
But now you can drop. I imagine one LoRa could do what? How many tanks? What kind of distance you can get that? 6 to 10 miles, maybe, from a LoRa network.
Got 30 in Canada, didn't we, Doug?
Yeah, 30 miles. Yeah.
So you can drop that in, cover all those tanks in that area, and then have one gateway to provide all the data back. So it's going to be kind of a cost-effective solution for that approach.
And this is an alt infrastructure here. I got to put this up because you guys can figure that one out really quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. That's for IoTs, definitely.
Yeah, so Todd, I think for getting started, we have enough opportunities in the ODA at this point. whether it's chem tanks or the sushi sensor pattern with vibration and temperature. I saw another one hit our screens with jet pumps. FE's running an example of that. That's just one way to the cloud. Again, it's a good way to get started and understand the patterns. I think that's the safe space. I had a question on the bridge. I'm curious how long that component of the architecture will have to exist. Are we seeing traction with Amazon and Microsoft picking SparkplugUp natively so that you could just have a trigger from IoT directly into Sitewise? And
I'm
doing that.
Yeah, I wish, Jonathan, but so far, everybody is their own expert. So, of course, Microsoft has their data model experts, and Amazon has their. And so I don't see that going away in the near term. But as much Todd and I are on the Sparkplug working group, we would love them to join and figure that out.
But at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to advocate for, is really just rallying folks around the open standard in all of these conversations. I know we've been leaning on Microsoft for probably 18 months now, and I haven't seen too much traction, but if we get enough folks together. But I feel like a lot of the discussions I've been having lately have been kind of educational experience, whether it's with Yokogawa, Multitech, Amazon, Microsoft, and it feels like we're getting there. So I want to make sure we keep that momentum, but I have no problem using the bridge in the interim. I know that some folks in our IT organization get a little, if it's not totally managed as a service for them, they start to sweat, which is... Yeah.
Well, this would be managed by them. So what we're doing, Jonathan, is this is going to be an AMI on Amazon. So this will be your Sparkplug bridge. This isn't a service that we're running this would be your EC2 instance with the application running on it.
Yep. Yeah, and that's just where some of our IT folks get a little bit uneasy whenever it's infrastructure anymore. They think everything's going to kind of be spoon-fed to us. I have no problem with it. But again, kind of driving that momentum towards the adoption of the standard.
Okay. AWS did, try to work with doing. They did the IMC kit that did some Sparkplug stuff. They reached out and had developed some stuff on Sparkplug, but they also don't have. It's IT people trying to work with Sparkplug, which used to be kind of they don't know what they don't know. So so we've basically taken our expertise and software we've already written to build this bridge, so that it does everything up front that needs to be done and is managed long term for that process. So it's really not that. I mean, if they start doing it, it'll be great, but I think it's going to be some time.
Yeah, it's a brand new service. I had a technical question, I guess, and this is for the Multitech guys as well. I'm curious in terms of when you're doing the payload definition, the LoRa payload, not the MQTT payload. You use radio bridge, I think, but where do you foresee kind of doing that payload decoding? Not security decoding, but you got 12, 11 bytes that you're trying to cram this message into, and we've seen an array of different approaches in terms of how people pack in information into those few bytes. Do you see, and again, if you have the new model, you need to push that definition either into your node red flow or something. I've heard a couple different approaches, but you bring in a brand new vendor, new device, they have some weird way of measuring pressure through their LoRa payload and their firmware. Okay, where do we define that LoRa payload standard?
Right. Well, I think what we do, Jonathan, we're not going to get everybody. It's kind of like, why did we do this? Is because we didn't want to wait, right?
Yeah.
And why we did this and why we're going to make these freely available is that we're working with Yokogawa. You're right, the radio bridge stuff. Now, notice, I want you to notice.
Are you really? You're working with Yokogawa?
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Perfect.
So, Nicholas,
Yokogawa has already SparkplugB capabilities, on the fast tools and the RGS.
So
not with their sushi line though. That's what we've been working on.
Arlen has 5 sushis at his house.
Yeah.
Randy has one on his dryer right now. He can't put it in the field, so.
Yeah, and I've got 3 sushi sandwiches sitting here on my desk.
Somebody want to send me one? I've been dying to get hold of one.
I'm getting hungry.
I was going to say,
small.
The other thing I want to point out, Jonathan, is that this is that bridge to radio. This is the link to radio bridge. But notice I have it connected. So I'm not touching the internet at all.
So with Ignition, if you had a change to this node red flow, I'm not sure what the mechanism looks like to push that down across 1,000 gateways. What would that even look like?
I don't know, Jonathan. I would love at being able to package that in an MQTT message, but I just got this far, so it's a good question. Definitely, something to ask. Yeah, we do that.
In addition, the EAM module has enterprise administration that you could build tools on that could do the messaging. So there's some stuff you'd be able to do with the EAM, and when you have that many models, this allows you to have a central tool to manage it. And I imagine there's some mechanisms that you could.
No, but not the Node Red flow though.
No, Jonathan. Today you push that Node Red flow down, using Device HQ today.
Yeah. That's kind of what we're doing today, but we're just using custom apps instead of Node Red flows. But yeah, that does solve the problem.
Yeah, and going forward, I mean, Node Red, with the 300, we'll be running of course, the latest version of Node Red, but you still have all the tools to write, your Python scripts or any other, C++. If you want to write a custom app to do that, certainly doable.
So I have a question to piggyback on that EAM feature that Kurt brought up. So EAM requires, I can't remember the port.
443.
443, yes. It requires it to be open all the way from 3 all the way to the cloud, right? That's kind of a big no-no, typical.
But it can be open from edge point up, so it's an outbound from the edge connected to the gateway. So you don't have to have your cloud connect down, but you do have the gateway at the edge be an outbound connection up to establish that connection.
Yep. So, but we could do this using MQTT traditionally and not use EAM, and that will eliminate a lot of security problems that we would face, like in the IRM world. I'm going to repeat my request, Kurt. You know what I'm asking.
No, we got something from Jose that we'll be responding to him next week on.
Yeah.
Okay.
About a file push.
Yeah.
So.
No, but that was also in the roadmap to have MQTT as the transfer protocol for the EAM.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, Arlen, I had a few thoughts in terms of next steps. I also wanted to recognize we got Kurt from Cal Poly on the call, and I've seen some notes going back and forth with inductive automation in them in terms of getting them licenses. I'm hoping we can step up and provide some projects to continue some of this research. I think that's one avenue.
Yeah.
The second one, if you recall, Ryan Ackerman from Weatherford was already headed down this path, and we've done some lightweight experimentation with them using MQTT off of pump-off controllers. I think getting that connection reestablished, and again, we have some jet pumps in the field that are more or less ODA, which is a safe space for us to explore. I think that would be worthwhile. And then the third point I was going to say was I think this was a great orientation, especially for us technical nerds. And I think I look forward to maybe we could share this more broadly at a conference or something somewhere down the road and get some broader awareness. Those are my three thoughts.
You just reminded me, Tolly's going to shoot me because I told him I was going to record this and we forgot.
I know. I tried to text you before or on the message, but I have a feeling this won't be the last time you do this.
No, I'll do it again.
Yeah.
I always thought next steps were placing orders for equipment. That's what I thought.
All right.
But
so, Todd, I told you and Jose that you need to see this demo because that's what we're trying to do with Microsoft. So I hope that this kind of like brought it home on what we're trying to do.
No, we cannot come to the same conclusion. I mean, you either wait until you die or you get something done yourself.
Right.
Yeah. Arlen, could you provide a little more color in terms of where are you getting stuck with Microsoft?
Well, they've got their own. They've heavily from a political standpoint, they're tied at the hip with OpenStreetLight. Right?
That's where it is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that is the anytime we get, I mean, they're looking, they're trying to figure this out. They know it's out there. Their sales guys know it's out there, but that big PTC Rockwell thing where all OPC-UA, that's the only way we're going to do it, has really been a mental roadblock for them in looking any other direction.
Definitely political.
Yeah, Emerson, ExxonMobil, oh yeah, tied into them. But yet, Emerson are saying they're going to do it on their next gen flow computer, and we know Aviva just went wild on SparkplugB, so we know that's out there now.
I also had a response when I accepted the invite. I haven't been active in the Slack channel that you already have. Could you share a little bit more about who should participate in that Slack channel for Sparkplug with the Eclipse Foundation? And would that be a suitable place for us to maybe continue and expand the conversation with this kind of disparate group of technologists?
Yes, it is, because ultimately, and Jose knows that Jose's had a bunch of really good ideas, right?
Yeah, and I've been attending that conference, by the way, just to let you know that.
Okay, but my point is that we didn't want to do anything else to Sparkplug because I felt like we would be hijacking it if we didn't get it into the community channel, to your point, Jonathan. So I think everybody that's interested in Sparkplug should get on that Slack channel and just have the open conversations.
Yeah, I think that'd be terrific. I've been looking for a place for this to continue, and I wasn't sure. That feels like the right place for us to continue these interactions.
Yeah, I agree. So I know we're over. I really appreciate. I apologize for the demo blowing up last week. I was sweating bullets this time, but I hope I got the point across. Again. A lot of this stuff is off the shelf now. The Sitewise they should be available here shortly. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't know Multitech's launch date, but what I'm seeing here with the Multitech and LoRa stuff looks really good.
Yeah, no, we're pretty excited about that, especially that new 300. I've got one on my bench here now. I'm just getting started with, and I think it's got a lot of potential, Arlen. So.
Right.
I have one more question. If we do what you're talking about at level 3 in ignition, can we just port that app to the cloud version of it on iAds, and then just go and drag and drop to redirect the tags from the MQTT distributor to what's in Sitewise? That's as easy as that? Okay.
Yes.
That's cool.
Yeah, definitely.
I like that Todd a lot.
So I guess, Todd, that brings me to the place we got stuck with Catherine Underhill's effort a few months back, where they were trying to set up a place for us to do stuff like this. At this point, we don't have anything from ETC.
Right, because they're freaked out about IaaS and the cost. But we got to go on functionality and capability.
You'd think that'd be enough.
Well, I mean, not having to redevelop an app, not having to go in and do a core site graphics or process book or, whatever, Power BI. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, just think about the money you saved there, right?
And again, I'm thinking the baby steps. You get them to view it in the cloud like this, and then, guys, we can actually control,
Yeah, I know. I know, Arlen, it makes total sense. Like, you had me at hello, honestly. I've been a big fan of Ignition for a long time. It's just coming out of the BU that I moved from. We was such a clear SCADA shop, it wasn't even funny. So,
yeah. Well, again, I'm just looking at it from the standpoint of how easy. Look at what we accomplished. I mean, literally, I started from scratch. Other than the fact that I had built these templates, okay, I cheated a little bit. But think of the fact that I started an hour ago, and all I had was a Conduit300, and then it had the flow computer, pump off controller. And Jonathan, you were talking about community. We've got another big project with Era Energy on doing a card per stroke off of their Lufkin and Halliburton pump-off controllers. So I'll definitely keep you in the loop on how we're doing with them because they're right there next door to you.
And another thing that we
most of ours are Lufkin as well, so I'd love to hear more.
Okay.
Another thing that we're seeing is we have people with existing systems that aren't Ignition, and they'll just drop in front of it OPCUA and a transmission module, and that still provides the path to the Sitewise, where you don't necessarily have to rip out an existing SCADA system. You can start out by just porting existing data in to an OPCUA connection, but still have the data model and have all the stuff built in, and start utilizing it just as a tool, transformation tool. Maybe down the road you can utilize it for more, but there's always an entry place to take that data in today, but using the same methodology and the same structures and models.
Maybe a slightly different question. Have you guys seen anybody deploy an Onyx model on an Ignition platform?
What's an Onyx model?
It's like a open format machine learning model.
Not that I know of. Off the top of my head, I do know that people are deploying Python at the edge to do some analytics using Edge, but I'm not a machine learning expert.
And Ignition has some data model, some analytic tools that they do today, and that's something that you can ask Ignition they have a few, I forgot, 3 or 4.
I'm actually really glad that Karthik brought that up. I think it was Karthik, because that's kind of been my newest area of focus the last few weeks. It stands for the Open Neural Network Exchange. So if you think about what Sparkplug is for SCADA or OT data, you can think of Onyx as that same open kind of standard that it doesn't matter where your model was trained, who trained it, it's a common. It means that you can run that on any inference engine, whether it's on the edge, the cloud of your choice. So it actually has really good backing by Amazon, Microsoft, all the big players, Intel. So when we talk about open standards, that's another key one that's kind of bubbled up on our radar, and we're really trying to use to align folks around. So I'm glad that came up.
Okay.
But yeah, it's ONNX.ai, Open Neural Network Exchange.
ONNX. Okay. Well, it'd be cool if they did a Sparkplug connector and could just plug into the infrastructure.
So if you can, I know Ignition can be deployed as a Docker, right?
Yeah.
Onyx can be deployed as a Docker too. So we can do a Docker to Docker connector of some sort. It would be great because the future of maintenance, reliability monitoring is going to be deploying low fidelity machine learning models, sometimes that are untrained models out, and then collect that data and figure out what the hell to do with it, and come back test your real-time data in the cloud and then push it down.
Yep.
So that cycle needs to be enabled, and right now, to deploy those type of infrastructures on traditional PC and DMZ type is very arduous. So this edge compute that we're coming up with, like IIoT technology, that just opens those gates up significantly. So anything you can do will help.
So, and just to add to Carl's point, have you guys actually tested this with Azure IoT Edge running on this device, on the Multitech, with the, have you run this as a container on Azure IoT Edge?
I haven't run it on Azure, but we've done a lot of Greengrass deployments on Amazon with the Docker image.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that it would be quite applicable. Now, I'm not running, right now, Ignition on the Conduit is not running in a container. I just installed it.
And then are there requirements to that running as a container? Like can run on ARM processors in general, or does it have to be Intel and x86 processors?
No, the Docker images that I've done on Greengrass have all been running on ARM.
Okay.
I don't think there was a requirement side. So
yeah, no, I mean sometimes the container image is big enough that it requires something like a x86 to run, especially if you're running IoT Edge on there as well. So it'll be interesting to see if you're an IoT Edge footprint plus if you run Ignition Edge, will ARM processor be able to support that? So
it would be pushing it right now. I will say on the conduit, I'm probably averaging 25% CPU utilization. So that's with a pretty heavy ROC EFM protocol, and I'm polling all of the process variables once every 5 seconds. I put that on there kind of on purpose in addition to the LoRa network. So I think the conduit, the way I'm seeing it, it could probably support several flow computers, pump-off controllers, Rockwell PLCs, and LoRa all at the same time. But ultimately, you will run out of headroom. You can't have hundreds of thousands of tags going through it, I don't think.
Yep. That raises a question for Multitech. I know we've talked about the hardware a lot, but I haven't seen where you guys were going with the software. I think you were running MLinux before. Is it more or less going to be the same OS on the new hardware? What are your, I'm looking for that pattern that's going to say this is the fabric that we can redeploy new container images on. Granted, Arlen kind of did this as a one-off install. So if we wanted to redeploy using the container concept, what's the underlying fabric that you guys are going to be looking to?
Yeah, I mean, today we're running the latest Yocto distribution of Linux, and then if you're running mPower, which is the most common deployment of it, you're going to be able to transport containers, I believe, between different devices. If that's what your question is, Jonathan.
More or less. I guess you kind of end up in a situation where people might redeploy their own. Maybe they're running Azure Edge or Greengrass,
right?
They're choosing whichever. And it's through those management consoles then that you go to your respective landing zone, have your container images, and then you push to it either through Azure Edge or Greengrass. That's the fabric that lets you secure and redeploy containers. Multitech on their own probably isn't going to be facilitating that unless I suppose you grow Device HQ's capabilities. Is that something you're looking to do?
Yeah, we are growing Device HQ's capability, and we're in the process of defining what that premium version of Device HQ is going to be. And then as far as how many containers we can support, right now we're kind of looking at being able to support maybe 3 containers and Dockers running on the conduit simultaneously. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay, great. Good to know. Thanks.
Okay.
So are you also on Multitech side? Are there any plans to do the lens is that a container by any chance?
Yeah. Lens is actually runs up in AWS right now, and there will be an on-prem version of it. So it's just something that we enable on the gateway to be able to talk to that join server that is off board of the conduit.
Okay, anything else, anybody?
So one last question.
That's awesome. Sorry, Syed.
Yeah, one last question is running as a container, running as a full version of IoT, as Ignition Edge. Are there any differences? I mean, there probably are some features which will be missing running as a container versus Ignition versus full version, right? Or
zero.
Okay.
It's literally the YAML file. The YAML file that I do for Greengrass or for other Docker, like Hillshire runs Docker, all of those YAML files is a full. There's no missing features.
So it depends upon what license version.
Yeah, I was about to ask about the license because we had this conversation.
More the licensing than the actual software.
Yeah.
So you have Ignition Edge. There's some limitation to Edge.
Correct.
Versus a full blown. If you just use a transmission module in a protocol, you can do unlimited tags, unlimited devices. So there's different models that you would get that would be utilized for different applications. Ignition Edge by itself is a limited version for a low-cost entry point for a few devices from that standpoint.
Okay, makes sense.
I think that actually kind of answers my earlier question in one way, which was, LoRa payload decoding. I mean, if you just have those wrapped up within your Ignition Edge image and you just redeploy the whole container with any other features or enhancements, you just version the container and redeploy the whole thing.
Yeah, that would be it.
Yep.
And from what I'm seeing right now, Jonathan, I don't think in our lifetime, in the near future, there's every LoRa manufacturer is going to come up with their own payload. But I mean, literally, and I'm not saying. I mean, it didn't take me. I don't know, maybe. And I was just learning all of the other stuff that was here. But now with the experience that I've got, I could probably do about any LoRa sensor in a few hours and have it done. And again, Jonathan, that was what I was hoping to point out here. The thing I like about this is LoRa is a bit magic. I mean, you go back to Radio Bridge and you have to hit their website, but here, and oh, by the way, you don't get a total message count. You don't get, but by doing a UDT, you can start adding enhancements to your LoRa sensors, and it's quite interesting. I mean, I'm quite pleased with how this. It's just a simple ultrasonic sensor with a tamper detect, but hey, it to me makes perfect sense.
Yeah, we keep learning every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Jonathan, kind of back to something that we've talked about for quite a while is that we're always hoping that there would be a standard payload format for LoRa sensors, and today, even though the low power protocol would be nice if everybody would implement it, but it just hasn't happened.
It's called SparkplugB.
Well, exactly.
It's a little heavy. The good thing there is that Philippe, who was on the call, he might still be. We're on the LoRa Alliance as of this year. Philippe added us. He's the vice chair. Daniel Quant's the chair for the industrial group, and that group highlighted this as an area we want to put some focus on. So we'll see. We're moving that way. It'll take time. Yeah. But in the meantime, we've got solutions.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, and guys, really, I mean, when I think about it, although I'm all about standards, there's only so much you can do in 7 bytes.
Well, and two, but the thing there is that it doesn't have, that is when you're running the most common data rate, which is data rate 0, where you have that 11 bytes worth of payload space. But if you run it at a different data rate, you can have more payload, but everything's a trade-off, right? In LoRa, is distance. That you trade off range distance with running a higher data rate to get more payload space. So it really kind of focuses on your application, what your range requirements are. So there's all these kind of it depends kind of statements when you're dealing with LoRa.
Well, Arlen, I really appreciate you throwing this together. This is incredible. I've been looking forward to seeing this ever since I heard you got it running on the Conduit. So thank you very much. This is where we kind of hoped it would end up, and it's amazing how much you can do in a short time. And I think there's definitely enough interest on this call to pick it up and see where we can take it. We have some opportunities for sure.
Okay, great.
And it's a testament to Multitech too on their hardware platform too. I mean, I don't like propping up vendors if I can avoid it. But at the end of the day, it's a real testament to. I mean, like Arlen's taken something basically from a dev platform and threw Ignition on it and got us basically an MVP if we really look at it that way, right? So.
Yeah, and what Arlen's been working on, he's been working on a development box. He isn't working on the final product.
Well, that's what I mean. I'm glad to have the same hardware in hand. At least I know what I'm going to be capable of doing with it. So
yeah, absolutely.
It gives me some hope, to be honest, Al.
Well, and as you work with these things, please provide us any feedback or anything that you see that we that we should address now, because we're looking at general availability, kind of in maybe December this year, maybe that if it gets if we run into some roadblocks, maybe first of next year. But for general availability, we want to have this thing tied up as tight as possibly we can possibly get it. So any feedback that you have, please shoot it our way.
No, it's awesome. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Al, to that point, I think what we are really going to be testing this also is with Azure IoT Edge, and then how that goes along with the deployment of provisioning in the cloud. I think that's the part which will be very interesting, and we definitely would like to understand and see if you can provide some feedback on that from our enterprise model we have currently for deployment of our gateways.
Yeah, and when we're very we haven't really tested that too much yet, but we are in the process of doing that. And so is one of the things you're really looking forward there is the support for DPS.
Yeah, I mean, I think DPS is there, but I think more than even DPS, it's about provisioning through the secure HSM or TPM or other type of hardware security encryption. So that'll be interesting to see which you guys have somehow developed. I think you guys have the feature available and how we can use that.
Yeah, and we're addressing that actually within the processor, and we're putting the architecture in now using the secure module in the Centera processor to do that. So that feature is absolutely going to be there.
And hopefully, I'd say by maybe November, December, we might have that Azure solution kind of in place, maybe.
Yeah, and I'll get with the software team and actually and I'll provide that information to everybody here or distribute it through Arlen. We'll get that out there as far as when we have actually finalized. Because we're working with Microsoft now. They've got the box. They've certainly worked with it, and that is definitely on the roadmap. And I'll have that information for you shortly.
Okay. Well, I was saying the similar thing to Sitewise, we're looking to have kind of done by the end of the year. So the data model and going into time series insights. So if that becomes,
will you guys be able to share that with us, Kurt? What you're talking about? How are you integrating that with Azure and what you guys are working on that?
Well, I think we have the structure. We don't have everything written out. We kind of have the fundamental components put in place, but we haven't started. We're soon to finish our AWS Sitewise bridge. We're going to work on that. Luckily, the bridge that we're having, all the southbound connections can be reusable. For that, it'll be doing the northbound to time series insights. So we'll be working on that after we finish this. So once we have that, we'd be glad to share the information.
Yeah, I mean, we are internally working with the time series insight engineering team as well over here, and we are pretty much plugged in with their effort. So it'll be very interesting to understand from you guys what you guys are working on. So maybe we can probably push something from our side as well to kind of prioritize that if needed. But that'd be a good conversation to have. How will that work? The TSI.
And you guys were asking, I mean, again, the phone calls that we were on is like, well, Arlen, why would you use SparkplugB? Because OPCUA has a data model. And I keep trying to explain to Microsoft and to Amazon that, and I don't know about you guys, and you guys can comment on this, but I've been doing this since OPCUA came out, right? DA. Nobody uses data models, right? So we're building something on the assumption that somebody's using it, but the problem is nobody's using it.
Yep. Probably will be the same case with OPCUA,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nobody's using it.
Well,
You
they
know,
had the
how
same.
long-
You have so many features.
Yeah, it's been around for 10 years and nobody's using it still.
Yeah, they keep adding features and more features. It's wonderful if you use it.
But I mean, the
It's
problem
like a LADA. You just keep putting in more stuff on the car, and nobody buys LADAs. You know.
But somebody could develop the spark plug on a sensor. It'd be very hard to develop OPC-UA on a sensor.
Yeah.
So you just that you know.
And if you do, it's going to have very limited capabilities. I mean, you can't expect everything of OPC-UA has to offer. So,
it's just not. Yeah. And it's real expensive to join the OPC-UA group. It's free for MQTT.
Yeah, like free.
Yeah. All right. Anything else other than having a great weekend?
Another thanks to Arlen for thanks Arlen for pulling this together.
Hey,
That's great.
I appreciate the interaction, and we'll be staying in touch with everybody.
Fantastic. Y'all have a great weekend.
All right.
You guys too.
Thanks, everybody.